It's just after 1:30 on the morning of March 26th of this year, and the Patapsco River is in chaos. Helicopters with spotlights hover above. Police and first responders rush around. The U.S. Coast Guard and their divers are preparing to go into the water. Just moments ago, a 984-foot container ship, the Dailey, had been making its way down the river from its port at the Seagirt Maritime Terminal. Less than an hour into its journey, it lost its power and... The crash caused a majority of the Key Bridge to collapse, killing 6 people and filling the entire channel with debris. The Port of Baltimore is the 4th busiest waterway on the East Coast, and one of the busiest in the country. Hundreds of large cargo and tanker ships load and unload every month, and over 30,000 passenger vehicles use the bridge every day. And within a matter of minutes, it was all destroyed. While the Coast Guard naturally received the first calls of distress, another group reporting to the scene was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Corps, originally founded in 1775, but officially formalized in 1802, oversees federal water spaces and other Army and federal projects. They make major contributions to all aspects of Americans' lives, and countries around the world look up to them. Leading the Corps' response has been Colonel Estee Pinchasin, the commander of the Corps' Baltimore district. In her 25-year career, the colonel has overseen a number of operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and across the United States. Her combination of experience and personality have made her the perfect commander for this large-scale cleanup mission. In today's episode, our hosts sit down with Colonel Pinchasin to discuss what she and her team have been doing in the recovery efforts, how her highly decorated Army career has led to this moment, and to talk about 2 photos that remind her of valuable lessons in life. I'm Carrie Varo-Heikes, and this is Army Matters.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant General Retired Leslie C. Smith, and welcome to Army Matters. I'm here today with my best buddy, my co-host,
Daniel A. Dailey. And I said the A this time because you said the C.
the A, Antonio.
Yeah, that's what it stands for. But what is this? What does the C mean in Leslie C. Smith? Wait, let me guess. Our listeners will love this. 3 guesses. I get 3 guesses.
Okay, 3 guesses. Go ahead.
Clarence.
Nope. Do I look like a Clarence? Give me a break.
All right. Okay. Charles.
No.
Clancy.
No. Carlton. Thank you very much.
Carlton. Ooh, that's proper.
Yes,
that's proper.
I should go by L. Carlton Smith.
Carlton.
You know? Yes, thank you.
L. Carlton Smith.
Yeah,
yes.
But I have to be an attorney or something to do that.
What is the background on that? Where did Carlton come from?
From my mom and dad. So each one of us, my brother and my sister, all are LCSs. My sister is Lola Cassandra. I am Leslie Carlton. My brother is Lawrence Calvin.
That makes good for when you're passing down clothes and they're
No.
Yes.
No.
We did that when we were kids.
Yeah, no, but that's only if you stencil the initials in the, clothes. That's another story.
So now, sir, your background was chemical, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But you know a little bit about engineers. Tell us about Army engineers. Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty cool. So and of course, I was at Fort Leonard Wood, so I spent a lot of time with the engineers.
Yeah, that's the home of the engineers.
That's right.
And the chemical corps.
That's right. And the military police, the Maneuver Support Center of Excellence.
So most people know our engineers as the guys out in the battlefield, clearing minefields.
You mean like sappers?
Building bridges.
Yeah, sappers.
Sappers, that's right. But there's a whole nother world to the engineer community in the Army.
It's called the Corps, the mighty Corps of Engineers.
What do they do?
Everything. Bridges, infrastructure, roads. Almost every waterway is run by the Corps of Engineers.
That's right. And when you talk waterways, you don't think Army.
Yeah.
You think Navy, and they play a huge role, and the Coast Guard, they play a huge role. But the Army Corps of Engineers, you mentioned, controls most of the inland waterways of the United States of America.
That's right.
Right? And unfortunately, just a few short weeks ago, there was a tragic accident that occurred in Maryland when the Francis Scott Key Bridge was hit by a cargo ship. And today we're going to talk about the response to that with the district colonel in charge of the Maryland district and the role that she played in the recovery, the ongoing recovery of that waterway and the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
So, Dan, why don't we get into this interview?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and roll the tape. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to have Colonel Estee Pinchasin, the Baltimore District of Corps of Engineers, with us today. Colonel Pinchasin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, ma'am, when did you first hear about the Key Bridge collapse?
That's funny you ask that. My mother-in-law called. I'm thinking about putting her on emergency management staff because she called me first. She called my husband's phone. That's what woke us up. And my husband hands me the phone to let me know. And while she's telling me what she saw, and I'm grabbing my other phone, my government phone, and then my chief of staff called. And then the phone calls started coming in. I handed my mother-in-law off to my husband and started getting to it.
So, Estee, did you know at that moment that you would be playing a key role in the recovery efforts?
Well, we knew right away because it fell into the Chesapeake, and that hinders our federal navigation channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's part of a larger system of Baltimore District maintains about 90 channels, and that's a very important one because it goes to the Port of Baltimore. And I don't know if you remember that 2 years ago, we had the Ever Forward that got stranded and ran aground in the same system, just a little further out. And we had the opportunity to participate as a supporting agency in the Unified Command that was stood up there, all the same players. So coming back together again, there's a lot of muscle memory. The human infrastructure was there.
Yeah. And what were your first thoughts? I mean, so you said you got the phone call in the middle of the night, and then your chief of staff called. And what's your first thoughts when you got that call?
My first thought was accountability.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard the story about how the response occurred and how the dispatchers all reached out immediately. They blocked off the bridges, they blocked more traffic from getting on the bridge and all the approaches. And then they really saved so many lives in that moment. But my first thought was, I don't know, maybe I've been trained well. Accountability in the Army was the first thing. Did we have anybody? Did we lose anybody? I knew it was in the channel, but the first thing I thought of were the people.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. Ma'am, where did you grow up? And share with our listeners a little bit about your childhood and why you wanted to join the Army.
Well, I was born in New York and had the opportunity to move around quite a bit. My father worked on ships. And so in the 70s, when things were kind of rough, when the Brooklyn Navy Yard shut down and things like that, we kept moving from port to port, following the jobs with different shipping companies. So I got to live in Connecticut and Florida and Louisiana and different places. But ultimately, my parents ended up settling in Long Beach, New York. Ended up in college, and that's where I saw kind of my first exposure to what ROTC really was. And I'm surprised that it took that long to really get to learn about that. When people used to ask, well, why are you doing that? You have a degree in computer science. That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be sitting in front of a screen all day. I love the idea of being outside, the opportunity to serve our country. And, when you go to a baseball game or any kind of sporting event and you hear the national anthem and you get goosebumps.
Yeah.
It was like that on steroids.
So, ma'am, you had a very successful career, including receiving 2 Bronze Stars and many other awards. Can you share with us the moment you realized that you loved your career?
So in my first assignment back in 2003, and it was actually with the 249th Engineer Battalion and the Prime Power Battalion, that first assignment with the Corps was eye-opening. I was just talking to our team here where, there we were. I remember going up Route Tampa. It was the main route going up into Baghdad. 5 miles an hour in the dust, moving so slow. And eventually you stop at some fob somewhere because you got to brake. And I got there by myself in this convoy of folks. And in the distance, I see this red engineer flag just flapping in the sand, right, in the wind. I walk inside. They don't know me from anybody. And they just kind of swallowed me up. They got me a place to sit and work and eat and call my mom on the sat phone. And when I saw that, I don't know why, my instinct was this exhale, oh, it's going to be okay. There's an engineer flag flying around. I have to say, it hasn't just been like that with the Corps of Engineers. It's like that with the engineer family, and it's like that with the Army family.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll tell you, as an infantry soldier, you have a great appreciation for your engineers. Not only do they clear the way for you many times when you run into obstacles, and those obstacles range from minefields to physical obstacles, or they build bridges for us. And we love the prime power guys, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan, because when they show up, that means you're getting air conditioning really soon.
That's so true. I have to say, sometimes it would be amusing where we show up with you've got your 5K and your 10K, but we would show up with a 750K or, enough generators to create a, 2 megawatt power plant. And you see the person running up there with their extension cord thinking they're just going to, but yeah, those guys are amazing, what they learn and their professionalism.
You keep a photo of an aerial image showing flooding at a military installation near Kandahar. Can you explain the importance of that photo?
Oh, my goodness. It's something that they teach us in the Army very well. Our soldiers and our NCOs know their craft, I feel, better than we ever will. And I love to have soldiers teach me the real deal, and NCOs to really get down to the granularity of what you're doing. And the most important part of that is understanding what the soldiers actually need, whether it's the time or the resources, or just to help make them successful and be advocates for them. And I think that when people look at someone because of the grade or their background or their skin color, and they assume what they have, whatever preconceived about their intelligence or their competence, that's a huge mistake. And you can make it in the Army, and you can also make it when you're deployed, and you've got locals that maybe can't speak English or didn't have the opportunity for education, but they might know a whole lot more than you realize. And that picture shows an area in Kandahar where we had significant flooding. And you can see where the Afghan base was and where the Russian village was, where the Russians had a base. And you see the airfield where it's kind of clear. Mm-hmm. And then you see where there's just an enormous amount of flooding. And there was this big area where we were setting up a logistics kind of hub where it was going to be a big laydown area. And it was completely flooded. And, I remember, the interpreter and the Afghans were saying, hey, it floods here.
In the desert, yeah.
We were with the Afghanistan Engineer District South down in Kandahar, and we would go with our interpreters, our security forces, but we would meet with the locals because of how important it was to have someone that we vetted and trusted to give us the real deal about the area. But that just reminds me of how you can dismiss somebody because of what you perceive about them. And it's not right. I've seen that very personally.
Yeah.
My father has an accent, and I've watched where people look past him or assume things. And so
that's right.
It's part of my thing that, there's a brain that goes with that pair of hands that's doing work, and you can either get everything out of it. Do you truly believe that every person has value? And are you willing to take the time to appreciate it? And do you really mean it?
Yeah. So ask the locals before you set up in a floodplain, right? So that's a moral of the story.
You have to also know, are they trying to trick you, right? Or is someone trying to pull one over? But in this case, these were people that were warning us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the most challenging moment you had during your career?
You know what? All the moments that I've had, all the things that, whether they were physically challenging, leadership challenges, the greatest challenge for me is balancing family time, is trying to be the best that I can, both at home and at work.
It's tough, especially in the Army. It's tough.
Yeah. You never know the kind of parent you want to be or what you think how it'll be until you're actually going through it. I remember before my last deployment, before my son was born, I was excited. You know how you get addicted to deploying? Like, remember, you feel guilty for not being there. Like, you want to come home, but then when you're home, you feel like you need to be over there because that's where everybody is. It's not an addiction, but it's that feeling of like, I really should be there. Everybody's there.
Yeah. I was the same way. My wife sometimes was like, I was itching to get back to Iraq and Afghanistan with our soldiers all the time.
That's where it's like you feel bad for leaving, but while you're there, you feel bad for being away. It's this weird tension. But I was about to head off to Afghanistan, and my friend, I'll never forget, she asked me, she said, "Are you afraid?" I was like, "No, actually, it's weird. I feel like I need to go." And I remember she said to me, she's like, "Well, Estee, that's all going to change once you have kids." And I was on my Army high horse. I was like, I said, people serve in the Army and have kids. And I feel like God was like, "Oh yeah, Estee, watch this." Bam. Like, let me show you what Melissa was talking about. And that's been the hardest thing, was when your son is holding onto your shoulders and he's like with all his might, and he's asking you to stay just a little bit longer. There's a picture that my husband posted on Facebook when I got selected for colonel. And it shows a picture of my son. He had the little lint trap thing that you do for your uniform, because he helped me. My son came to do my DA photo, and my husband posted something like, "Congratulations to Estee. She made it 06, and here's Joey squaring her away for her DA photo for her promotion board." But what you don't know is that morning I was getting dressed, and you know how at the DA photo lab, if you're going to be late by 1 minute, that's it, right? It's like,
that's right. Yeah. So
I was just getting dressed, and the baby monitor is on. And I hear Joey, Bobby my husband, is working with, getting him ready. And Joey asks where I am. And Bobby said that I had to leave early because I had a thing. And Joey said, Mommy forgot about me again.
Oh my God.
I thought I was going to die. I run in like, I could never forget about you. I could never, ever forget about you. And then he said again, like I left. So I was like, that's it. The whole family came to the DA photo lab and we were doing that together. But cause like I still, my throat closes even just thinking about the fact that he would ever think for a second that I could leave. Do you know what I mean? Without kissing him goodbye or something. And I know that sounds really mushy and raw and really personal, but I feel like my job is to help create that environment for our family to talk about this. And it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to miss you. And that's okay.
But that's the life of a soldier. And it's quality time. It's as what my wife used to say, it's not quantity time, it's quality time. So you got to make it special while you can, because there's going to be days when you're not home. I missed 10 years of my son's life, and I can exactly relate to what you're saying, ma'am. Yeah, it's hard. But it's also the biggest reward in the world, too. It's hard to explain to people that don't do it for a living, about how tough it is to go, but how much it hurts to be away from soldiers, too. It's a difficult balance.
On May 26th at 8 p.m., the 35th Annual National Memorial Day Concert returns live from the West Lawn of the U.S. Capitol, hosted by Joe Mantegna and Gary Sinise. This National Night of Remembrance honors the service and sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, military families, and all of those who have given their lives for our country. Also featuring Bryan Cranston, Cynthia Erivo, Jenna Malone, and others. The event includes live performances, musical numbers, and historical reenactments. It will air and stream live on PBS and then be available on YouTube 2 days later. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. Join AUSA, the Army's premier professional association and host of the largest land power exposition in the United States. AUSA is open to everyone, including all ranks and components. So whether you have a relationship with the U.S. Army or simply want to honor those who serve, you can learn more at ausa.org/join.
Welcome back to Army Matters. Now, ma'am, you talked in the very beginning about the phone call you received informing you of the Key Bridge disaster. Well, let's fast forward now. Up to this point, what has your team done to respond?
So I think it's important to note that the channel that's being obstructed right now is a channel that we maintain all the time. And when that occurred, we had these massive thousands of tons of steel spans of this bridge that are now laying inside and deep into the mud at the bottom of this riverbed of the Patapsco River of wreckage that's blocking traffic into and out of the Port of Baltimore, which is a major economic impact, not just to the region, but nationally because of what the Port of Baltimore provides for our country. So we knew we were going to have to clear the channel, and that was a long-term goal because the initial response was a search and rescue operation. And what we had in the lead was the Maryland Transportation Authority Police on the scene as the incident commander, coordinating the response to that. And they were struggling to find engineers that were able to assess the wreckage from a safety perspective, to get the divers to get close enough to the wreckage to maybe be able to pull out any of the missing persons. So we had that capability in our district. We had some excellent structural engineers who have urban search and rescue experience. We were able to link them up right away. We had our survey vessels and our debris removal vessel at the ready to support. And we ended up launching those dive operations for those teams off of our vessel. So a very different mission than surveying the channel. But that was what was needed on the first day and then also the second day, which transitioned from rescue to recovery.
And what did the site look like, ma'am, when you first got there? And what did you think?
It's just surreal until you get up close and right up against it, and you can't fathom the enormity of it. It's overwhelming and sobering at the same time. And the better understanding we got from the 3D sonar and the description of what the divers were seeing, we started to understand that the extent of what was collapsed in the center was far more complex than it looks. When you look at the spans that are laying there in the water, it looks like a Jenga set going down.
Yeah. Like an erector set, just laying there. Then you think,
right.
yeah.
Like
yeah.
you can just cut it up.
Yeah.
And what we might not realize is how much tension and compression is on those members and how that can be very dangerous. It's not as easy as when my son asks, well, Mommy, all the cranes are there. Why don't you just pick it up? It's far more complex than that. I have to say that the most important aspect for me was getting the right capability to help with the problem.
Yes, ma'am. Can you give us an idea of the progress that's made? And well, I'm going to put you on the spot too. And when do you think it's going to be complete?
So there's a very large span that is laying across the vessel going into the federal channel. And the initial plan was to tackle that. The idea was to cut the major portion off that's hanging off the vessel and lower that to the bottom of the riverbed, and then disconnect that from the main load. But it turned out that was going to be too unsafe, and we shifted to the far side of the channel to be able to open a limited access channel. And that's coming up here this week. So we can at least provide some relief to the port and get down to 35 feet, which can allow about 70% of the regular traffic that would go into the port. They can have that clearance to get into the Port of Baltimore or out. And then we're going to take additional steps to have the channel fully open by the end of May.
That's great news. So what has been the toughest challenge for you and your team so far?
The greatest challenge is safety. What these folks are doing is not, it's not safe. But what's making it possible is that we're being very disciplined, and we are giving people the room to go back, double check. We want to do this as quickly as we can, but safely. And we're not going to compromise on that. We don't want to have any more casualties on this site.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your team's been working extremely hard, 20-hour days, ever since the first response. And how are you and the team holding up? So
we started right away. At first, we implemented 2 shifts very early. So my goal was, I didn't want, if anyone ever felt that they were walking into the unified command like, oh, I have to do this again, we want to enforce the take a break before you're on empty. We want you to be taking breaks so that you're staying green, and that you're coming here green, and that you're leaving here before you even get to the yellow. I remember one of the reporters asked me, he's like, oh, you're working all the time, no sleep. We cannot do this with no sleep. We need to be fully rested, thinking clearly, good decision-making, good judgment. We are not sleeping. And I have to say, I've been more disciplined in this situation than I feel I've been in ever. I normally kind of like surge and sleep, This time I know that I've been much more disciplined normally on this than I've normally been.
Absolutely. So, ma'am, throughout this whole process, the Baltimore community has been very supportive. I mean, how important is that to you and your team?
Well, that's who we work for. That's who we're serving. This is our home. It's our family. I can't tell you how many people are affected by this directly and indirectly, whether it's personally or friends. I think it's really important for them to know that they have the absolute best team that they possibly could between the core family, the salvage community, the Navy salvage experts, the Coast Guard, all the state and federal partners coming together. The outpouring of support from the community is so appreciated, and we feel like that's who we're really working for.
What a good note to end on. It's all about the people, and it's all about the mission. Thanks for all you do for the Army Corps of Engineers, but more importantly, thanks for all you do for us in America.
Thank you for having me.
On Army Matters, we sit down with guests who are constantly overcoming multiple challenges. In today's chapter spotlight, we focus on our Greater Los Angeles chapter and multiple events they are hosting. On May 30th and 31st, the chapter will be hosting the GLAC AUSA Space Symposium at the Long Beach Hilton. An intimate and interactive event, these 2 days provide an opportunity for organizations like the Army, as well as Space Force, the Missile Defense Agency, the Marine Corps, and others, to discuss how best to support warfighters with space-based assets. The event will feature an opening keynote address by Brigadier General Eric Little, the Deputy Director of United States Space Command. And on June 1st, the chapter will be holding the AUSA Army Birthday Ball at the Long Beach Hilton Hotel, a night of fine food and dancing in an elegant setting. It's an historic event that's been in existence for decades, and this year's guest of honor will be the Command Sergeant Major Brian Barker of the 18th Airborne Corps and Fort Liberty. Both events continue the Greater LA chapter's long tradition of saying, "Thank you for your service." And we here at Army Matters would like to say to the chapter, thank you for hosting these events. If you or your chapter would like to be profiled on the show, please email us at podcast@ausa.org. Hooah.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Army Matters is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at AUSA.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission, educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and supporters of a strong national defense. Today's episode was hosted by Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith and SMA Retired Dan Dailey, and anchor hosted by Carrie Barrow-Heckes. Anthony Del Call is the producer and writer, and Andy Bosnack is the supervising sound editor. Ellen Toner is the content editor. Unzinga Curry is the executive producer, and the senior producers are Carrie Barrow-Heckes and LaSharon Duncan. Be sure to subscribe to Army Matters wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. As you know, we love seeing stars in the Army, especially if it comes in the form of a 5-star review. AUSA's Army Matters podcast can also be heard on Reach Across America Radio on Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, on the iHeartRadio app, the Odyssey app, and the TuneIn app with the search of the word Reef. AUSA's Army Matters podcast primary purpose is to entertain. The podcast does not constitute advice or services. While guests are invited to listen, listeners, please note that you're not being provided professional advice from the podcast or the guest. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AUSA. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. I'm LaSharon Duncan. Hope you have a great Army Day. Hooah!